Maybe I'll look better next time. I'm getting my commissary today some mascara and a brush.
I know I was raped, and you ain't nothing but a bunch of scum.
The day that I pleaded no contest to Marion, there was a big write-up in the front page about the cops doing their movie anyway.
I am sorry that my acts of self-defense ended up in court like this, but I take full responsibility for my actions.
On the phone and told her I was going to confess to clear her. Get the public to believe that she's a serial killer, and you're going to have to get her convicted in order to get this movie to go.
A heavy burden feels lifted. I feel like now we can start trying to heal.
21-year-old New Boston woman was killed and her unborn baby abducted.
And I absolutely think that she got the punishment that she deserved today.
Defense attorneys suggesting someone else might be responsible for the murder of a New Boston mother and her unborn baby.
Taylor will have an automatic appeal to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals.
They went through the evidence and the law and felt that they had plenty of information.
Taylor Parker is on death row tonight, hours after a Bowie County jury sentenced her to die.
Homer Hancock was the last to take the stand today and was what was already a difficult day of testimony for friends.
This cell block home are all sentenced to die.
My sister, Carrie Lynn Dalton, was convicted of capital crime. I'd watched a complete farce from beginning to end come to its conclusion.
A little over 5 years here.
Right, but I've been in prison 9 years. Really affected me, so let me pull myself together a moment.
The myth and the reality. What you've heard about Eileen Wuornos has some elements of truth. She did indeed slay 7 men in Florida. She did work as an adult worker. At the urging of her bi ex-lover, she made a surprising in-depth confession, and during her trial she was legally adopted by a kind woman who claimed to have received guidance from God. She made notable obscene outbursts in a number of courtrooms and is currently on Florida's ending row, where she has received 6 ending sentences, the most of any inmate. These statements are all true. However, it's critical to cut through some of the exaggerations surrounding the Wuornos case right away. She wasn't the first female serial slayer in America. While their victims are mostly family members or friends, women have been committing serial slayings for just as long as men, and they typically opt for poison over alternative methods of disposal. Wuornos used a gun to slay uninvited guests. This was rare but not unique.
The day that I pleaded no contest to Marion, there was a big write-up in the front page about the cops doing their movie anyway.
Okay, there will be an automatic appeal. You have the right to an appeal. Mr. Glazer, is that going to be handled by you?
She knows it's self-defense, and she's not saying anything because she's involved in...
And the media jumped all over it. Wuornos' adultery operations are also absurdly overstated. Her assertion that she had physical relations with 250,000 men, which was generally believed to be true, is absurd. To accomplish this achievement, she would have had to bed 35 different men each day for 20 years. Wuornos lacked the endurance and organizational abilities required for such a record-breaking effort. Eileen Wuornos is still intriguing even after the most spectacular rumors about her were proven false. She is both repulsive and yet pitiful. From the moment she was detained, her aggressiveness all but sealed her fate and made most people who came into contact with her or learned about her case dislike her. Her swagger and assertions that each of her 7 victims attempted to physically attack her are as absurd as her brag that she had serviced 250,000 Johns. Her confession, her friendship with and adoption by Arlene Prowl, and her never-had-a-chance personal past add drama to these elements, and one can't help but be drawn into her story. Early life. On February 29, 1956, Wuornos was given the name Eileen Carol Pittman and was born in Rochester, Michigan. Leo Dale Pittman, the father of Eileen, and Diane Wuornos, her mother, were wed on June 3, 1954, when Diane was only 15 years old. 2 months before Eileen was born, less than 2 years later, Diane filed for divorce. Keith, Eileen's older brother, was born in February 1955. Wuornos never met her father since, at the time of her birth, he was serving time for physically attacking and trying to slay a 7-year-old girl. Leo Pittman, who was regarded as having schizophrenia, was found guilty of physically abusing minors, spent time in and out of jail, and in 1969 he hanged himself there. Diane left her children with their maternal grandparents, Lori and Britta Wuornos, in January 1960 when Eileen was about 4 years old. On March 18, 1960,
Now all I need to do is slide through the rest of these stupid trials with Pasco Dixon.
I sentence you in case number 91-463 to death for the murder of Troy Burris.
On the phone and told her I was going to confess to clear her.
Lori and Britta formally adopted Keith and Eileen. Wuornos started having physical relations in class when he was 11 years old in exchange for food, drugs, and cigarettes. Additionally, she had had physical relations with her own brother. Wuornos asserted that her alcoholic grandfather beat and physically attacked her as a young child. He would allegedly make her take off her clothes before beating her, according to her charges. She was attacked by a friend of her grandfather in 1970 when she was 14 years old, leading to her pregnancy. In a facility for single mothers, Wuornos gave birth to a kid who was later given up for adoption. Wuornos quit school a few months after having her child, just around the time her grandmother passed away from liver failure, and she and her brother subsequently became wards of the court. She was kicked out of the house when she was 15 by her grandfather, and she started living in the nearby woods and supporting herself through adultery. Early criminal career. Wuornos was detained for DUI, disorderly conduct, and slaying a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle on May 27, 1974 in Jefferson County, Colorado. She was then charged with FTA, failure to appear. Wuornos hitchhiked to Florida in 1976, where she met Louis Gratz Fell, the president of the yacht club, who was 69 years old. They got married that year, and the local newspaper's society section published a notice of their union. However, Wuornos frequently got into fights at their neighborhood tavern and eventually got arrested for assault. Fell was also struck by her with his own cane, which prompted him to file for a restraining order against her. Upon her return to Michigan, Wuornos was detained and charged with assault and disturbing the peace for hurling a cue ball at a bartender's head on July 14, 1976 in Antrim County, Michigan. Wuornos received $10,000 from her brother Keith's life insurance when he passed away on July 17 from esophageal cancer. Following just 9 weeks of marriage, Wuornos and Fell decided to dissolve their union on July 21. In an armed robbery of a convenience store on May 20, 1981, Wuornos was captured in Edgewater, Florida, and charged with taking $35 and 2 packs of cigarettes. On 4 May 1982, she received a prison term.
And so I lost a lot of my regulars, and Tyra told me, well, why don't you go out there and do your strangers again like you did from the beginning?
I am sorry that my acts of self-defense ended up in court like this, but I take full responsibility for my actions.
She was released on 30 June 1983. Wuornos was detained on May 1, 1984 for attempting to use a bank in Key West to pass fake checks. She was identified as a suspect in the Pasco County theft of a pistol and ammo on November 30, 1985. Wuornos was detained on January 4 in Miami and charged with grand theft auto, resisting arrest, and obstructing justice after presenting identification under the identity of her aunt. The stolen car had a .38 caliber handgun and a box of ammunition, according to Miami police officials. Volusia County, Florida deputy sheriffs held Wuornos on June 2, 1986 for questioning after learning that she had allegedly pulled a revolver on him in his car and demanded $200. A .22 pistol was located under the passenger seat that Wuornos had occupied, and she was also determined to be carrying extra ammunition. In a homo club in Daytona at this time, Wuornos met Tyria Moore, a hotel maid. Together, they moved in, and Wuornos paid their rent with the money she made from adultery. Wuornos and Moore were held by Daytona Beach police on July 4, 1987 at a pub for interrogation over an incident in which they were charged with violence and assault with a beer bottle. Wuornos accused a Daytona Beach bus driver of assault on March 12, 1988. She stated that after an altercation, he shoved her off the bus. As a witness to the incident, Moore was listed. Slayings. Owner of an electronics store in Clearwater, Florida, Richard Malley, 51 years old, on November 30, 1989. A convicted physical attacker was Wuornos' first victim, whom she claimed to have slayed in self-defense. A deputy sheriff from Volusia County, Florida, discovered Mallory's abandoned car 2 days later. Mallory's body was discovered on December 13 in a rural location some distance away. Despite being slayed multiple times, it was determined that 2 bullets to the left lung were what slayed him. Wuornos would ultimately be found guilty of this crime. Construction worker in Winter Garden, Florida, David Spears, 43. His naked body was discovered on June 1, 1990 in Citrus County, Florida, along Highway 19. 6 holes had been fired at him. Rodeo employee Charles Carskaden, 40 on May 31, 1990. His body was discovered in Florida's Pasco County on June 6, 1990. He had received 9 slays from a small caliber gun. Peter Sims, 65 years old. Sims moved to New Jersey from Jupiter, Florida in June 1990.
Get the public to believe that she's a serial killer, and you're going to have to get her convicted in order to get this movie to go.
I have made peace with my Lord, and I have asked forgiveness.
His automobile was discovered on July 4, 1990, near Orange Springs, Florida. Wuornos's palm print was discovered on the interior door handle, and Moore and Wuornos were spotted getting out of the vehicle. He was never discovered. 50-year-old Florida sausage salesman Troy Burris is from Ocala. His disappearance was reported on July 31, 1990. His body was discovered on August 4, 1990, in a rural area near State Road 19 in Marion County, Florida. He had received 2 slays. Police reserve Walter Gino Antonio, age 62. In Dixie County, Florida, on November 19, 1990, Antonio's completely naked body was discovered close to a lonely logging road. 4 slays had been fired at him. His automobile was discovered in Florida's Brevard County 5 days later. Apprehension and sentencing. Following their collision on July 4, 1990, Wuornos and Moore left Peter Sims' vehicle. Witnesses who saw the woman operating the victims' vehicles gave police their names and descriptions, which prompted a media blitz to find them. Additionally, police recovered fingerprints that matched those found in the victims' cars from pawn shops where they had discovered some of the victims' items. Her fingerprints were recorded, and Wuornos had a criminal justice history in Florida. Wuornos's trial for the slaying of Richard Mallory began on January 14, 1992. In criminal prosecutions, prior wrongdoing is typically not admissible, but because of Florida's Williams Rule, the prosecution was able to present evidence pertaining to her earlier offenses to demonstrate a pattern of criminal behavior. With the assistance of Moore's testimony, Wuornos was found guilty of slaying Richard Mallory on January 27, 1992. Psychiatrists for the defense testified that Wuornos had borderline and antisocial personality disorders and was mentally ill at the time of her sentencing. She received an ending sentence 4 days later.
Maybe I'll look better next time. I'm getting my commissary today some mascara and a brush.
I know I was raped, and you ain't nothing but a bunch of scum.
Wuornos entered a not guilty plea to the slayings of Dick Humphreys, Troy Burris, and David Spears on March 31, 1992, claiming she wanted to get right with God. I wanted to confess to you that Richard Mallory did violently attack me, as I've told you, but these others did not, she said in her statement to the court. They just started to, really. Wuornos received 3 additional ending sentences on May 15, 1992. Wuornos was once again given the ending penalty after pleading guilty to the slaying of Walter Gino Antonio in February 1993. She was not charged with Peter Sims' slaying because his body was never discovered. She was given 6 ending sentences in total. Wuornos narrated a number of contradictory tales regarding the slayings. She initially asserted that all 7 males had physically assaulted her while she was performing as an adult worker, but later changed her story to reflect that she had acted in self-defense. She told filmmaker Nick Broomfield that it was self-defense, but that she could not abide being on Ending Row, where she had been for 12 years at that point, and that she wanted to die during an interview when she believed the cameras were off. Ending. In 1996, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected Wuornos's appeal. She declared in 2001 that she would stop filing appeals against her ending sentence. I slayed those men, robbed them as cold as ice, she claimed in her plea to the Florida Supreme Court, asking for the authority to terminate her attorney and end any appeals. And I do it once more, because I would slay again. There is no possibility of keeping me alive or anything else. Hatred is slithering through my body. I'm so tired of hearing that she is crazy. I've undergone so many evaluations. I'm capable, rational, and I'm attempting to be honest. I'm one of those people that despises human life and would slay once more. She was in the wrong state, according to the defense attorney, for them to comply with the request.
Just shot in self-defense, boom, boom, boom. You know, they weren't cut up, they weren't sliced up, no OJ jazz, you know.
Because I was no professional serial killer or anything, murderer or whatever you want to call it, you know.
Killed those men in cold blood.
Yeah, and I got to come clean that I killed those 7 men. I guess not. All they were was shot and left.
Jeb Bush, the governor of Florida, gave 3 psychiatrists a 15-minute interview with Wuornos. The psychiatrists must be persuaded that the condemned person is aware of her impending end and the crimes for which she is being terminated in order to pass the competence test. She was deemed mentally fit for execution by all three. Later, Wuornos began accusing the prison matronesses of mistreating her. She said that they had contaminated her food, spat on it, served her potatoes that had been boiled in mud, and delivered her meals with pee. She also stated that she overheard discussions about trying to get me so pushed over the brink by them I'd wind up committing self-hurt before the ending and wishing to physically attack me before ending. Additionally, she bemoaned being subjected to strip searches, having her wrists bruised every time she left her cell due to the handcuffs, door kicking, routine window checks by matron, low water pressure, mildew on her mattress, and catcalling in distaste and a pure hatred towards me. When particular officers were on duty, Wuornos threatened to stop using showers and meal trays. My stomach is growling, and I'm taking showers in my cell's sink in the meanwhile. According to her lawyer, Miss Wuornos only wants to be treated properly and humanely until the day she is put to end. If the claims are untrue, she is obviously crazy. She is confident in her writing. She had a number of interviews with Broomfield throughout the last phases of the appeal process. She claimed that sonic pressure was controlling her mind in her last interview, conducted just before she was put to end, causing her to appear insane.
Okay, I cannot go in the execution chamber and die in the execution chamber as a liar.
Psychologists sketch a portrait of a damaged person with a lurid history of abuse that began in childhood.
You know, I was just wondering how you're going to be, at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Are you prepared?
I'm prepared.
If it was a horrendous crime, why didn't I shoot them between the eyes, cut their stick it in their mouth, do all kinds of gross stuff.
She also said that angels were transporting her to heaven on a spaceship as she approached demise. "You ruined my ass, society, the police, and the system," Wuornos said to Broomfield. An attacked woman was ended and utilized in books, movies, and other crap. She ended the interview by saying, "Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass." Later, Broomfield ran into Wuornos' childhood friend, Don Botkins, who said to him, "She's sorry, Nick. She didn't point the finger at you. She first pointed her finger at the press before pointing it at the lawyers. She simply made the decision not to speak further because she understood that doing so might affect how she ended the next day." Last meal. On October 9, 2002, Wuornos was led into the ending room. She was given a $20 budget and informed that her last meal had been KFC and coffee. "Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus," she said seconds before she was put to end. Like in the movie June 6. I'll be back, big mothership and everything." Eileen Wuornos passed away at 9:47 a.m. Eastern Time. She was the second woman to be slayed in Florida and the 11th woman to be put to end in the U.S. since the Supreme Court overturned the ban on the ending penalty in 1976. Wuornos herself appeared to be at ease with her impending end. In fact, she seemed to be excited to depart the world of the living.
And I cannot go in the execution chamber and be executed under the devil.
Let them know that I know that the cops knew who I was after Richard Mallory died.
I have to come clean and cleanse my spirit in the name of Jesus Christ.
It wasn't special at what I was doing.
Eileen,
I did some sloppy work, and I left.
How have you prepared yourself for tomorrow morning?
In his notes, a prison guard who interacted with Wuornos while on Ending Row wrote, "Wuornos is very angry at the media and corrupt institutions, and says she can't wait until Wednesday at 9:30 so she can be with her God and punish all the evildoers for the way they treated her." Wuornos was 46 years old when she died. After demise, Wuornos was executed and her body was burned. Don Botkins, a childhood friend, transported her remains to her native Michigan, where they were scattered beneath a tree. She asked that Carnival by Natalie Merchant be played during her funeral. When questioned why her song was played during the documentary Eileen, Life and End of a Serial Slayer's credits, Natalie Merchant responded as follows, "I couldn't even see the film when director Nick Broomfield sent me a working edit since the subject matter offended me so much. Eileen Wuornos lived a life that would make my greatest nightmares pale in comparison. I didn't agree to the song's use until I learned that Eileen asked Carnival be played at her burial and spent a lot of time listening to my album Tiger Lily when she was on Ending Row. It's strange to consider where my music might end up after it leaves my hands. I have to express my gratitude if it brought her some comfort." In a later statement, Broomfield said, I think this anger developed inside her. She was also engaged in adultery. I believe she encountered a lot of terrible people on the roadways, and I believe that she simply let her wrath out of her body and ultimately detonated into shocking brutality. That was how she managed to live. Eileen may have genuinely thought she was acting in self-defense.
The lies that went on through my mouth, I mean, now prosecutors and cops.
And that you killed the 7 men.
And let me kill the rest of those guys to turn me into a serial killer. I know they did. As they said, they had it right. A serial killer. Not so much like thrill kill. I was into the robbing biz. And he said I did the most horrendous crime in the whole wide world.
I believe that a person who is severely psychotic is unable to distinguish between a situation that poses a serious threat to their life and a trivial disagreement, such as when you might say something that she didn't agree with. She would lose her cool and erupt in a black rage about it, and that, in my opinion, is what had brought about these events. When she wasn't in those severe moods, though, she also had a remarkable humanity. Psychopathology model. Some experts argue that Wuornos's crimes were motivated by her psychopathology and her tragic past. Wuornos achieved a psychopathy cutoff score of 30, with a score of 32 out of 40 on the psychopathy checklist. Wuornos was also known to meet the necessary standards for identifying antisocial and borderline personality disorders. The majority of Wuornos's childhood physical abuse and career in physical relation work are said to have left her permanently scarred, and it is possible that traumatizing events throughout most of her early life, such as the separation from her biological mother and her grandmother's disregard for the abuse Wuornos suffered from her grandfather, contributed to the lack of a mother-daughter bond for Wuornos as a young child.
Abandoned by her teenage mother when she was just 6 months old, Lee was raised by her alcoholic grandmother.
I mean, you know, serial killers are in this thrill killing jazz. I was into the robbing.
And a cruel grandfather who regularly beat her with his belt buckle. Lee, it sounds like you've been betrayed by everyone.
That's right.
The connection between Wuornos and her adoptive parents was then made worse by the fact that Wuornos and her brother both thought their grandparents were their biological parents until they discovered otherwise at the age of 11. Additionally, Wuornos was reported to have had early behavioral issues such as an explosive temper that hindered her capacity to make friends and made it more and more difficult for her to sustain connections. The development of her borderline personality disorder has been largely attributed to her horrific upbringing, which included physical abuse. The structuralization of the mind at different developmental stages can also be disrupted by such intense trauma, which can lead to primitive, dissociative, and splitting defenses to ward off the intensity of emotional and physical stimulation that cannot be integrated as a child. Wuornos is briefly mentioned by FBI profiler Robert K. Ressler in his autobiographical account of his 20 years working for the agency. He claimed in a 1992 article that he frequently avoids talking about female serial slayers since they usually go on slaying sprees rather than slaying one victim at a time. Wuornos was the lone exception, he said. Ressler, who is credited with coining the term serial slayer to characterize slayers acting for personal enjoyment, does not use it to refer to women slaying in postpartum psychosis or to any slayer acting only for money, such as women who have slain a number of roommates or spouses. Legacy, books. Wuornos was only briefly referenced by FBI profiler Robert K. Ressler in his autobiographical biography of his 20 years with the agency. He claimed in a 1992 article that he frequently avoids talking about female serial slayers since they usually go on slaying sprees rather than slaying one victim at a time. Wuornos was the lone exception, he said. Ressler, who developed the term serial slayer to characterize slayers acting for personal enjoyment, does not use it to describe women slaying in postpartum psychosis or to describe any slayer acting only for money.
But I'm coming clean before I go in that execution chamber and be executed. That's why I don't care if I'm executed and leave this planet and eliminate a witness. But still, then again, I got a number, so it's serial killer.
Such as women who have slain a string of roommates or spouses. Lethal Intent is a book about Wuornos that was written about by journalist Sue Russell in 2002. Music. On June 22, 2001, the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco, California, hosted the world premiere of an operatic version of Wuornos's life. The opera, titled Wuornos, was created by Carla Lucero, a composer and librettist. Mary Chun served as conductor, while the John Sims Center for the Performing Arts served as a production company. Jewel, the New York metalcore group It Dies Today, and Pablo Hasél are just a few musicians that have penned songs about Wuornos. From her performance album Malediction and Prayer, singer Diamanda Gallas covered the Phil Ochs song Iron Lady live. She frequently performed it as a tribute to Wuornos. On their studio album The Second Coming from 2004, the Japanese doom metal group Church of Misery included the song Filth Bitch Boogie Eileen Wuornos. Both Lingua Ignota's 2017 album All Bitches Die and Dragged into Sunlight's 2009 album Hatred for Mankind prominently incorporate samples of interviews with Wuornos at the opening of the tracks For I Am the Light and Mine is the Only Way and Holy is the Name of My Ruthless Axe. Wuornos is also mentioned in the song If the Poison Won't Take You, My Dogs Will by Lingua Ignota from her 2018 album Caligula. Superheaven's Poor Eileen, the last song on their 2015 album Ours is Chrome, is a tribute to Eileen Wuornos. On William Belly's third album, Eileen, a parody cover of Dolly Parton's Jolene, donated by Wuornos, is included. On November 1, 2018, Gigi Gorgeous, who played Wuornos, appeared in the music video. For her single Press in 2019, artist Cardi B replicated the infamous mugshot of Wuornos. Rapper Sadistic put the Serial Slayer song Eileen Wuornos on his Delirium EP in 2020. In a chilling and harrowing case that shocked the nation, Taylor Parker, a 29-year-old woman, has been handed a demise sentence for the brutal and calculated slaying of her pregnant friend, Reagan Simmons Hancock. The horrifying events that transpired in 2020 culminated in a verdict that will see Parker on demise row, a stark reminder of the heinous nature of her actions. Reagan Simmons Hancock, a 21-year-old young woman, was the unsuspecting victim in this tragic tale of betrayal and violence. She and Taylor Parker had been friends, a bond that would eventually shatter in the most unimaginable way. 2020 was marked by a series of events that would forever alter the course of their lives. On the surface, their friendship appeared unremarkable, but lurking beneath was a sinister plot driven by Parker's desperation and deception. In a trial that gripped the community, the prosecution painted a horrifying picture of the events leading up to the slaying. Taylor Parker, driven by a fear of losing her boyfriend, embarked on a twisted and elaborate scheme to fake a pregnancy. Her determination to keep her partner led her down a dark path of deception, ultimately culminating in the unthinkable. Parker's deceit knew no bounds. She meticulously crafted a facade of pregnancy, complete with fake ultrasounds and even hosting a gender reveal party. These actions were part of her elaborate ruse, designed to convince her boyfriend that she was carrying their child. The extent to which she went to maintain this facade was nothing short of chilling. The fateful day of the slaying arrived, forever staining the lives of those involved. On this tragic day, Parker took her deception to a nightmarish level. Consumed by her obsession, she conducted intensive research on how to convincingly fake a pregnancy. She even watched a video on the physical examination of an infant delivered preterm at 35 weeks, all in a twisted bid to maintain her web of lies. Reagan Simmons Hancock and her husband, Homer, had unwittingly welcomed this predator into their lives. Taylor Parker, who had taken their engagement and wedding photos, had seemingly become a close friend. Little did they know that behind the friendly facade lay a person capable of unspeakable horrors.
21-year-old New Boston woman was killed and her unborn baby abducted.
I think obviously the experts would even agree that she just creates chaos where she goes.
The trial revealed the horrifying details of the crime scene, where Reagan Simmons Hancock met her tragic end. Prosecutors displayed a crime scene photo depicting Simmons Hancock soaked in blood on the floor, a stark reminder to the brutality of the slaying. She had not only been subjected to having her unborn baby forcibly ripped from her womb, but also endured numerous knife wounds and beatings. Prosecutor Kelly Crisp passionately argued for the demise penalty, asserting that Taylor Parker posed a grave danger to society. The gruesome and torturous circumstances of Reagan Simmons Hancock's demise left no room for leniency, and Crisp's plea for the maximum penalty resonated with the jury. In stark contrast, Taylor Parker's defense attorney, Jeff Harrelson, appealed for leniency. He argued that there were complexities and shades of gray in Parker's life, portraying her as a human who had been let down by friends and family who failed to confront her about the fake pregnancy.
Taylor will have an automatic appeal to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals.
Defense attorneys suggesting someone else might be responsible for the murder of a new Boston mother and her unborn baby.
And I absolutely think that she got the punishment that she deserved today.
The trial unfolded in a courtroom filled with grief-stricken family members. Jessica Brooks, the mother of the victim, addressed Taylor Parker in a heart-wrenching statement, labeling her an evil piece of flesh demon. She vividly described the torment her daughter had endured, fighting for her unborn child's life as Parker tore her open. In the end, the jury's swift deliberation, taking just over an hour, led to a verdict that sent shockwaves through the community. Taylor Parker was sentenced to demise, an ultimate punishment for a crime marked by unfathomable cruelty. As the courtroom proceedings came to a close, Judge John Tidwell delivered the somber sentence, ordering Taylor Parker to be taken to Demise Row. The sentence served as a stark reminder of the horrifying depths to which one person's deception and obsession can lead, leaving a young mother and her unborn child in their wake, forever haunted by the specter of violence. Fate of a pregnant woman and unborn baby. In the courtroom, the trial unfolded as a gripping narrative of betrayal and cruelty. Taylor Parker's conviction for capital slaying sent shockwaves through the community, highlighting the gruesome nature of the crime. The jury's unanimous verdict underscored the weight of the evidence presented by the prosecution. Reagan Simmons Hancock, a 21-year-old woman, was in the prime of her life when she tragically met her end. She had forged a relationship with Taylor Parker, a woman she believed to be trustworthy. However, behind this veneer of friendship lurked a sinister motive driven by Parker's fear of losing her boyfriend. As the trial progressed, it became clear that Parker's deception was both elaborate and deeply disturbing. Her desperate attempts to convince her partner that she was pregnant included manufacturing fake ultrasounds and staging a gender reveal party. These actions showcased the extent of Parker's commitment to her deceit. On the day of the slaying, Taylor Parker's deception took an even darker turn. In her quest to maintain the illusion of pregnancy, she had conducted extensive research on how to convincingly fake a pregnancy. This included studying a video on the physical examination of an infant delivered preterm at 35 weeks. Such meticulous planning demonstrated a chilling level of premeditation. Reagan Simmons Hancock and her husband, Homer Hancock, had welcomed Taylor Parker into their lives as a friend. The shocking revelation that someone they trusted could commit such a heinous act left the community in disbelief. Parker's role as a trusted friend made the betrayal all the more devastating. As the trial unfolded, the courtroom was filled with heartbroken family members, each grappling with the incomprehensible loss of a loved one. Jessica Brooks, the mother of the victim, confronted Taylor Parker in a gut-wrenching statement, describing her as an evil piece of flesh demon. She vividly portrayed the torment her daughter endured as she fought for the life of her unborn child while Parker brutally attacked her.
Investigators shared the evidence in day 9 of the Taylor Parker murder trial.
Former close friend of convicted killer Taylor Parker describes a heart-pounding encounter.
Throughout the proceedings, prosecutor Kelly Crisp passionately argued for the demise penalty, emphasizing the exceptional cruelty and danger posed by Taylor Parker. Crisp painted a horrifying picture of the crime scene, with Simmons Hancock soaked in blood and subjected to multiple injuries, including being beaten and knifed numerous times. In contrast, Taylor Parker's defense attorney Jeff Harrelson sought to portray his client as a complex individual let down by friends and family who failed to address her deception. Harrelson appealed for leniency, urging the jury to consider the shades of gray in Parker's life. Jury deliberates swiftly. In a courtroom marked by tension and gravity, the jury delivered a swift and decisive verdict in the case of Taylor Parker. Their deliberation, lasting just over an hour, concluded with the sentencing of Taylor Parker to demise. This rapid decision sent a clear and chilling message about the severity of the crime and the collective determination of the jury. The brevity of the jury's deliberation, while surprising to some, underscored the horrifying nature of the case. Taylor Parker had been found guilty of capital slaying, a charge reserved for the most heinous of crimes, and the evidence presented during the trial left little room for doubt. The prosecution had painstakingly detailed the gruesome and torturous circumstances surrounding the slaying of 21-year-old Reagan Simmons Hancock and the theft of her unborn child. The crime scene itself, with Simmons Hancock soaked in blood and subjected to multiple injuries, was a haunting reminder of the brutality of the act. Prosecutor Kelly Crisp had passionately argued for the demise penalty, highlighting not only the exceptional cruelty of the crime, but but also the danger Taylor Parker represented to society. The prosecution's plea for the maximum penalty resonated with the jury, who seemingly wasted no time in reaching their decision.
Tough, lengthy case, factually and emotionally, for everybody involved.
Today, the jury saw a bloody and bruised Taylor Parker taken by police.
Grateful for the jury. I think their quick verdict was a testament to the strength of the case.
In contrast, Taylor Parker's defense attorney, Jeff Harrelson, had appealed for leniency, acknowledging the complexities and shades of gray in Parker's life. However, the jury's rapid verdict suggested that they saw the crime as an unforgivable act that warranted the harshest possible punishment. The swiftness of the decision left the courtroom in a somber and reflective mood as the reality of the sentence settled in. Taylor Parker was ordered to be taken to Demise Row, a fate that would serve as a stark reminder of the gruesome depths to which her obsession and deception had led, leaving a young mother and her unborn child as tragic victims of a shocking act of violence. Victim's mother confronts Slayer. Amidst the tense and emotionally charged courtroom proceedings, a poignant and heart-wrenching moment unfolded when Jessica Brooks, the mother of victim Reagan Simmons Hancock, confronted the convicted slayer, Taylor Parker, directly. In a powerful and searing address, Brooks did not hold back, denouncing Parker as an evil piece of flesh demon, and expressing the profound pain of losing her daughter and her unborn grandchild. The courtroom fell silent as Jessica Brooks, her voice trembling with emotion, directed her words towards Taylor Parker. With raw and unfiltered grief, Brooks painted a vivid and devastating picture of the anguish she'd endured as a mother who had lost her child in the most horrifying manner. Addressing Parker as an evil piece of flesh demon was a stark and visceral condemnation of the heinous act that had taken place. It reflected the depth of Brooks's anguish and the searing anger she felt towards the person responsible for robbing her of her daughter and her future grandchild. Brooks's address went beyond words. It was a raw and unfiltered expression of the pain that had engulfed her and her family. It provided a poignant and unforgettable moment in the courtroom, one that underscored the profound and enduring impact of violent crime on the lives of the victims and their loved ones.
A heavy burden feels lifted. I feel like now we can start trying to heal.
The courtroom was packed with members of Reagan's family, and many of them broke down in tears as the verdict was read.
In her address, Brooks vividly described how her daughter had been alive and fighting for the life of her unborn child when she was brutally attacked and had her baby forcibly ripped from her womb. The description painted a haunting picture of the horrific events that had transpired and the unimaginable suffering Simmons Hancock had endured in her final moments. The courtroom, filled with family members and spectators, bore witness to the raw and unfiltered emotions of a mother grappling with an unthinkable loss. Jessica Brooks's address was a stark reminder of the human toll of such a heinous crime and showcased the resilience and courage of victims' families in the face of unimaginable tragedy. As the trial continued, the impact of Jessica Brooks's words resonated with those in attendance, serving as a powerful reminder that behind every legal proceeding, there are real lives shattered by violence and loss. Her address confronting the convicted slayer in court was a moment of profound catharsis and a poignant tribute to the memory of her daughter and grandchild. Gruesome details emerge. The 2020 slaying of pregnant woman Reagan Simmons Hancock unfolded as a nightmarish tragedy that shook the community to its core. The case revealed gruesome and horrifying details about the slaying, leaving an indelible mark on those who learned of the heinous act. Reagan Simmons Hancock met a tragic end that defied belief. The crime scene itself painted a chilling picture of brutality and terror. Her baby was forcibly removed from her womb, a grotesque act that left no room for doubt about the level of violence involved. In addition to the forced removal of her unborn child, she had suffered numerous injuries. She had been subjected to multiple knife wounds, beaten mercilessly, and her skull had been fractured in 5 different places. The extent of her injuries, combined with the sheer number of knife wounds, left a haunting and macabre scene for investigators to contend with.
I wanted to speak for our family and, let her know what we all felt. Just how terrible.
The verdict comes after weeks of grueling testimony that shared horrific details about the crime.
She is the mother of the man prosecutors say Taylor Parker was trying to keep when she killed Reagan Hancock and cut her baby.
The details of the slaying sent shockwaves through the community, leaving residents in disbelief that such a gruesome and horrifying act could occur within their midst. It was a crime that transcended the bounds of comprehension, a stark reminder of the depths to which human cruelty could descend. The case stood as proof of the resilience of law enforcement and the justice system in the face of such unspeakable violence. It also underscored the importance of swift and thorough investigation to bring those responsible for such heinous acts to justice. As the trial unfolded, the community grappled with the trauma of the crime and the enduring pain felt by the victim's family. The details that emerged during the legal proceedings served as a stark reminder of the need for vigilance and support for victims of violence and their loved ones. In the end, the 2020 slaying of Reagan Simmons Hancock left a lasting scar on the community, a harrowing reminder of the capacity for darkness that can exist within the human psyche. It was a case that shook the collective conscience and served as a solemn call for justice and accountability in the face of unspeakable horror. Parker's deception, faking pregnancy. Taylor Parker's elaborate ruses to fake her pregnancy ultimately culminated in a series of horrifying events that left the community in shock and mourning. Parker's deception was nothing short of staggering. Driven by an overwhelming fear of losing her boyfriend, she embarked on an intricate and sinister scheme to convince him that she was carrying their child. Her deception was not limited to mere words. It extended to a web of elaborate lies and fabricated evidence. One of the most disturbing aspects of Parker's deception was her creation of fake ultrasounds, a deceitful act that showcased the extent of her commitment to her charade. These falsified medical documents were designed to provide irrefutable proof of her pregnancy and reinforce the illusion she had carefully crafted. In addition to fake ultrasounds, Parker went so far as to host a gender reveal party, a celebratory event typically reserved for expectant parents. This party was yet another layer of her deception, an attempt to convince her boyfriend and those around her that a baby was on the way. The tragic consequences of Parker's deception would unfold on a fateful day in 2020. On that day, her intricate web of lies and manipulation would give way to violence and horror. The slaying of Reagan Simmons Hancock, a young pregnant woman who had befriended Parker, was a shocking culmination of the deceitful charade. As the trial revealed, Parker's fear of losing her boyfriend had driven her to a point of no return. Her desperate attempts to maintain the illusion of pregnancy led to a chain of events that defied belief. Prosecution argues for maximum penalty. In a courtroom charged with tension and emotion, prosecutor Kelly Crisp delivered a compelling and impassioned argument for the maximum penalty in the shocking slaying case involving Taylor Parker. Crisp's plea for the demise penalty underscored the brutality of the crime and the profound and lasting impact it had on the victim's family. Throughout the trial, Crisp meticulously laid out the horrifying details of the case, leaving no room for doubt about the exceptional cruelty of the crime. The description of the crime scene, with Reagan Simmons Hancock soaked in blood, multiple injuries inflicted upon her, and the gruesome act of forcibly removing her unborn child, painted a chilling and unforgettable picture. Crisp's argument for the demise penalty was grounded in the belief that the nature of the crime demanded the harshest possible punishment. She emphasized not only the act of slaying, but also the terror and suffering endured by Simmons Hancock in her final moments. The prosecutor's impassioned plea resonated with those in the courtroom, conveying the gravity of the situation and the devastating impact on the victim's family.
They went through the evidence and the law and felt that they had plenty of information.
Taylor Parker still has no remorse for the killing of Reagan Hancock and kidnapping her unborn baby.
But we just pray every day that she gets what she deserves for what she did to Reagan and Braxton.
The prosecution's relentless pursuit of justice was fueled by a desire to ensure that Taylor Parker faced the consequences of her actions to the fullest extent of the law. Crisp argued that Parker's role in this heinous crime posed an ongoing danger to society, and the demise penalty was the only appropriate response to such an exceptional level of cruelty. As the trial continued, the courtroom witnessed the emotional toll the case had taken on the victim's family, who had endured the unimaginable loss of a loved one. Crisp's argument for the maximum penalty was a reflection of the deep sense of responsibility to seek justice for the victim and her grieving family. In the end, Crisp's passionate advocacy for the demise penalty served as a stark reminder of the extraordinary nature of the crime and the enduring pain it had inflicted. It was a plea that called for accountability and closure, acknowledging the profound impact of the crime while reaffirming society's commitment to justice in the face of such horrifying acts. Defense attorney appeals for leniency. Amidst the harrowing and tragic events of the trial, Taylor Parker's defense attorney, Jeff Harrelson, made a plea for leniency. In an emotionally charged courtroom, Harrelson acknowledged the complexities that had defined Parker's life and urged the jury to consider the various shades of gray in her actions. Harrelson's appeal for leniency was marked by a recognition of the multifaceted nature of Parker's life and circumstances. He argued that while the crime was undeniably heinous, it was essential to explore the layers and nuances that had shaped Parker's path and choices. Throughout the trial, Harrelson had contended that words can be used to dehumanize, suggesting that a more nuanced perspective was necessary to understand the full scope of Parker's actions. He emphasized the importance of acknowledging the humanity within even those who commit grave crimes.
So obviously we're disappointed with the outcome.
Today, in the trial of a Texarkana woman accused of killing a mother and cutting her unborn child from her womb.
We don't have this over our heads. We know where she's going to be. We know where she's at.
In his plea for leniency, Harrelson also pointed to the absence of a safety net for Parker when her life began to unravel. He argued that friends and family had failed to confront her about her fake pregnancy, leaving her in a vulnerable and isolated state. Harrelson's appeal for leniency introduced a dimension of empathy and compassion into a courtroom fraught with anger and grief. It urged the jury to consider the factors that had led Parker down a dark and destructive path, and to question whether there were opportunities for intervention that had been missed. While Harrelson's argument for leniency faced the formidable challenge of mitigating the horror of the crime, it served as a reminder that even in the most chilling and tragic cases, the pursuit of justice should encompass a comprehensive understanding of the human experience. Ultimately, the defense's appeal for leniency represented a call for a more nuanced and compassionate approach to the justice system, one that seeks not only to punish, but also to comprehend and address the complexities of human behavior, even in the face of the most shocking and heart-rending crimes. Parker convicted of capital slaying. In a case that sent shockwaves through the community, Taylor Parker was found guilty of capital slaying by the jury. The verdict came after a trial that had laid bare the chilling details of the crime scene, a sight so horrifying that it left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. The crime scene painted a nightmarish picture of brutality and terror. Reagan Simmons Hancock, the victim, was discovered covered in blood, her body bearing multiple injuries that spoke to the heinous nature of the crime. The extent of her suffering and the gruesome details of her injuries left no doubt about the exceptional cruelty of the act. The jury's verdict of capital slaying carried grave implications for Taylor Parker. It signified not only her guilt, but also the acknowledgement that the crime had reached the threshold of the most severe charges under the law. Capital slaying, with its potential for the harshest penalties, underscored the gravity of the offense. The trial had been marked by emotional testimonies, graphic evidence, and a deep sense of sorrow for the victim and her family. As the jury deliberated and reached their verdict, the weight of the crime and the pursuit of justice hung heavily in the courtroom. The conviction of Taylor Parker for capital slaying was proof of the dedication of law enforcement, the prosecution, and the justice system in seeking accountability for such heinous acts.
We all hoped it was coming to that. We weren't for sure, but we hoped it was coming to that.
Taylor Parker is on death row tonight, hours after a Bowie County jury sentenced her to die.
I think she has been very difficult for the jail staff here in Bowie County.
In my opinion, she deserves death. The same thing that she did to my niece and the baby girl.
It was also a reflection of the collective determination to ensure that those responsible for the most shocking and heart-rending crimes faced the full force of the law. As the trial progressed, the community grappled with the trauma of the crime and the enduring pain felt by the victim's family. The conviction served as a step toward closure and justice in the face of unspeakable horror. In the end, the jury's verdict of guilty for capital slaying was a solemn acknowledgement of the exceptional severity of the crime and a commitment to holding the perpetrator accountable for the suffering and tragedy that had unfolded on that fateful day. Judge sentences Taylor to ending row. In a solemn and definitive moment that marked the culmination of a long and harrowing legal process, Judge John Tidwell delivered a sentence of demise to Taylor Parker. With unwavering determination, the judge formally imposed the most severe penalty, ordering Parker to be taken to demise row. This sentence came as a result of her role in a heinous crime that had left a young mother and her unborn child lifeless, a tragedy that had shocked the community to its core. Judge Tidwell's pronouncement of the demise penalty was a weighty decision that carried profound consequences. It signaled the court's unwavering commitment to ensuring that justice was served in the face of unspeakable horror and suffering. The sentence of demise was a solemn acknowledgement of the gravity of Parker's actions and the enduring pain inflicted upon the victim's family and the community at large. It was a reflection of society's determination to hold individuals accountable for the most horrific and heartrending crimes.
Homer Hancock was the last to take the stand today and was what was already a difficult day of testimony for friends.
So I'm very thankful that they saw the evidence the way that the state did.
Jurors in the Taylor Parker capital murder trial heard some of Parker's jail calls today.
Testimony comes as the penalty phase continues.
Jury heard from Taylor Parker herself when her police interview videos were played.
Taylor Parker's journey to Demise Row was a somber and solemn moment in the legal process, a moment that marked the end of one chapter while ushering in another. Her fate had been sealed, and she would now face the consequences of her actions as determined by the court. As Parker was ordered to be taken to Demise Row, the courtroom bore witness to the profound and enduring impact of her crimes. The victim's family, who had endured unimaginable loss, found a measure of closure in the judge's decision. Judge John Tidwell's sentencing was a reminder that the justice system would not waver in its pursuit of accountability and closure for the victims of heinous crimes. It shows the enduring commitment to upholding the principles of justice, even in the face of the most chilling and tragic circumstances.
Crime and murder details. On June 26, 1988, a horrifying and gruesome murder occurred at a mobile home park in Live Oak Springs, California, forever altering the lives of those involved. The victim, Irene Louise May, tragically lost her life in a vicious act of violence driven by a dispute over stolen jewelry. The primary perpetrator of the heinous crime was Carrie Lynn Dalton, who firmly believed that Irene May had stolen her precious jewelry. Fueled by anger and a desire for revenge, Dalton enlisted the help of 3 accomplices, Mark Lee Tompkins, Cheryl Ann Baker, and an unidentified individual referred to as George. Together, they embarked on a brutal campaign of torture that ultimately led to May's untimely death. The events of that fateful day would forever be etched in the minds of those who investigated the case. The group subjected May to a nightmarish ordeal that defied all notions of humanity. Armed with a cast iron frying pan, a knife, and a syringe filled with battery acid, they sought to inflict unimaginable pain on their victim. The torture involved a barrage of merciless beatings, multiple stabbings, and the administration of electric shocks, leaving May in excruciating agony. Throughout the ordeal, May's pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears as her tormentors continued to inflict suffering without remorse. The cruelty and brutality displayed during the torture were beyond comprehension, leading many to wonder how such atrocities could be committed by fellow human beings.
This cell block home are all sentenced to die.
They're on death row for a pretty good reason.
To the women in this one little area seem so normal, like everybody.
They can be the nicest person, but I have that in the back of the head that they have that potential.
Basically live like the general prison population,
Yes.
just confined
In a
within this
little
area.
yes.
But this is it, this is their world.
This is it.
Can I just start by asking you how long you've been here?
I've been on the road a little over 5 years.
Despite extensive investigations by law enforcement, May's body was never recovered. The lack of a physical body presented a significant challenge to the investigators and later the prosecution. The absence of tangible evidence made it difficult to conclusively establish the full extent of the violence and the exact circumstances surrounding her death. This absence also left May's family without the closure that comes from a proper burial and farewell to their loved one. The investigation into the crime and the subsequent trial painted a chilling picture of the individuals responsible for this heinous act. Carrie Lynn Dalton and her accomplices face a justice system seeking answers and accountability for the unspeakable horror inflicted on Irene May. The trial proceedings were emotionally charged as the prosecution presented harrowing details of the torture and the defense sought to challenge the credibility of the evidence. The trial's outcome was a pivotal moment for the victims' families and the community as justice was sought for the grievous loss of Irene May's life. After a thorough examination of the evidence and a painful deliberation process, the jury found Carrie Lynn Dalton guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and murder. The jury also determined that two special circumstances were present: intentional killing while lying in wait and intentional killing involving the infliction of torture. As a consequence of the jury's decision, Carrie Lynn Dalton was sentenced to death by lethal injection. The severity of the sentence reflected the gravity of the crime and the desire for justice on behalf of the victim and her loved ones. However, the case would continue to be a matter of legal contention and public debate in the years that followed. Despite the conviction and sentencing, the case would take unexpected twists and turns during the appeals process. Legal challenges raised concerns about the validity of certain charges and evidence presented during the trial. The Supreme Court of California would eventually weigh in on the case, making significant determinations that impacted Dalton's sentence. The unresolved nature of Irene May's disappearance, coupled with the evolving legal developments, left a lasting impact on those involved in the case and the broader community. It serves as a reminder of the devastating consequences that violence and cruelty can bring to the lives of individuals and their families. The memory of Irene Louise May continues to be honored by those seeking justice and closure, while the events of that dreadful day stand as a stark reminder of the importance of upholding the principles of justice and compassion in society. Accomplices and weapons used. The murder of Irene Louise May was not the sole work of Carrie Lynn Dalton. She had a group of 3 individuals assisting her in carrying out his horrifying act. Among them were Mark Lee Tompkins and Cheryl Ann Baker, who actively participated in the torture and killing of May. Additionally, there was a mysterious individual only referred to as George, whose identity remained undisclosed, yet he was allegedly involved in the crime. Mark Lee Tompkins played a prominent role in inflicting physical harm on the victim. His actions were central to the torture that Irene May endured. During the gruesome ordeal, Tompkins wielded a cast iron frying pan, a weapon that in hands of a merciless perpetrator became a tool of violence and devastation. The pan's heavy and solid nature made it a terrifying instrument, capable of causing significant injuries and pain. Cheryl Ann Baker, another active accomplice, participated in torture and killing, amplifying May's suffering. Her involvement in the crime added another dimension of brutality to the already horrifying act. Baker, like Tompkins, contributed to the violence with an equally menacing weapon, a knife. This sharp and deadly instrument was used to stab the defenseless victim multiple times, further intensifying the anguish infliction upon her. In addition to the cast iron frying pan and knife, the group employed a syringe filled with battery acid to administer electric shocks to Irene May.
A little over 5 years here. Right, but I've been in prison 9 years. I'm pretty mad a lot of the time.
Pretty mad? Mad at who?
Nothing, because I have an extensive criminal history, because I'm a drug addict, because I admit that I'm a drug addict, because I've been an outlaw most of my life, you know, but I'm not guilty of this crime. So as far as throwing my life away and spending my life in prison.
Do you have feelings of regret?
Definitely.
Or remorse for all the things you did that all...
I'm sorry for my whole life, I am. I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm proud of the things I've done. I'm very ashamed. I don't mean some angel, poor innocent, picked up out of society. My life took me here.
This sinister method of torture aimed to inflict pain and fear, as the acid would cause excruciating burns and tissue damage upon contact with May's skin. The use of such a vile and malicious tactic exemplified the utter lack of compassion and humanity displayed by the perpetrators. The combination of these weapons, chosen with deliberate intent to maximize suffering, created a nightmarish scene of torture and violence. The act of barbarity unleashed upon Irene May was marked by its sadistic nature, leaving her with no chance of escape or survival. The motivations behind the choice of weapons and the willingness of Dalton's accomplices to participate in such cruelty remain subjects of speculation and horror. The heinous acts committed by this group defy rational understanding and remind society of dark depths human beings can descend to when driven by rage, revenge, or malevolence. As the investigation and trial unfolded, the role of each accomplice and their specific contributions to the crime were meticulously scrutinized. The collective responsibility of these individuals was pivotal in securing justice for the victim and her family. The tragic tale of Irene Louise May serves as a summer reminder of the importance of seeking justice for victims of such unfathomable acts and ensuring that those responsible are held accountable. The legacy of this crime echoes through the annals of the criminal justice system, making it a poignant and heart-wrenching chapter in the quest for truth, closure, and a society free from such cruelty. Arrest and trial. The investigation into the murder of Irene Louise May was meticulously exhaustive, leading law enforcement to Carrie Lynn Dalton as the primary suspect. On May 14, 1992, authorities arrested Dalton in connection with a heinous crime that had taken place at the mobile home park in Live Oak Springs, California. The arrest marked a critical turning point in the pursuit of justice for the victim and her family. Subsequently, the trial for the murder of Irene May commenced on February 14, 1995, under the jurisdiction of the presiding judge, Thomas J. Whelan. The trial proceedings were emotionally charged as the gravity of the crime weighed heavily on the courtroom. Through the trial, the judge and the legal teams grappled with several complex and challenging aspects of the case. A significant hurdle for the prosecution was the absence of Irene May's body, which made it difficult to establish the full extent of the violence perpetrated against her. The lack of a physical body created a unique legal scenario, requiring the prosecution to rely heavily on circumstantial evidence to build their case. The conflicting circumstantial evidence surrounding the case further complicated matters. The defense raised questions regarding the credibility of certain testimonies and the reliability of evidence, challenging the prosecution's version of events. The absence of a crime scene and direct evidence, combined with the conflicting narratives presented by witnesses, made it challenging for the jury to arrive at a conclusion, understanding of the events that transpired on that tragic day. During the trial, there were allegations of confessions made by Karen Lynn Dalton. However, these alleged confessions were based on hearsay, as there was no direct admission from Dalton herself.
My sister, Carrie Lynn Dalton, was convicted of capital crime. Any physical evidence without a crime scene and without anyone being declared deceased, nearly the task force wanted him to, because he testified that he spoke with her nearly a month after what they were drinking, where they were at, and even though the police threatened him with testimony, he knows that he saw his wife. So the police actually got San Diego Superior County Courthouse is where they keep the transcripts, and her trial transcripting on this film, and with the very deep hopes that folks will want. Life on death row is really, really bad for you, emotionally, physically, mentally.
The defense contested the validity of these alleged confessions, highlighting the possibility of misinterpretation or manipulation of the statements. As the trial progressed, the courtroom bore witness to the harrowing testimonies of witnesses who provided first-hand accounts of the nightmarish torture inflicted upon Irene May. These testimonies painted a chilling picture of the cruelty and brutality that characterized the crime, leaving those in the courtroom in disbelief and horror. The defense, in contrast, sought to challenge the credibility of the prosecution's evidence and witnesses. They presented alternative theories and explanations to cast doubt on the guilt of Carrie Lynn Dalton and her alleged accomplices. Throughout the proceedings, the jury was faced with the difficult task of sifting through the conflicting narratives and determining the truth amidst a sea of uncertainty. As the trial drew to a close, the judge, Thomas J. Whelan, acknowledged the challenges posed by the absence of Irene May's body and the conflicting circumstantial evidence. He emphasized the importance of establishing the corpus delicti in such cases, a legal requirement that mandates proving the occurrence of a crime before a person can be convicted. Ultimately, the jury was tasked with considering the evidence presented by both the prosecution and the defense, weighing the credibility of witnesses and deliberating on the guilt or innocence of the accused. The fate of Carrie Lynn Dalton and her alleged accomplices rested in the hands of the jurors, who bore the immense responsibility of delivering justice for the tragic loss of Irene May's life. As the trial concluded and the verdict was reached, the impact of the crime continued to reverberate through the courtroom and beyond. The pursuit of justice for Irene May had taken its course, but the impact of her untimely death would forever remain etched in the hearts of her loved ones and the collective memory of those affected by this brutal act of violence. Conviction and sentencing. The trial of Carrie Lynn Dalton for the murder of Irene Louise May had been a challenging and emotionally charged ordeal lasting several weeks. As the proceedings came to an end, the moment of truth arrived for the jury, who held the weighty responsibility of determining Dalton's guilt or innocence. After careful considering the evidence presented by both the prosecution and the defense, the jury reached a verdict.
Really affected me, so let me pull myself together a moment. Let me start with this, that will help me get back on balance here. Slide easily from the Honorable Judge Thomas J. Whalen's lips. The meticulously groomed, silver-haired man. His melodramatic words followed the pronouncement that he was upholding the sentence. I'd watched a complete farce from beginning to end come to its conclusion. There were no checks and balances in place to ensure justice was served for all. This could happen to anyone so far removed from the average person's life, concerns, and interests. Its insignificance affords it little. It will be revealed that our justice system does not always work.
The defense sought to present mitigating factors, shedding light on Dalton's troubled past and arguing for the possibility of redemption and rehabilitation. On the other hand, the prosecution emphasized the severity of the crime and the necessity of holding the perpetrators accountable through the most stringent punishment available under the law. Ultimately, the jury rendered its decision. On May 23, 1995, they sentenced Carrie Lynn Dalton to death by lethal injection. The announcement of the death penalty sentence elicited mixed reactions from those present in the courtroom. While some found solace in the notion of justice being served, others grappled with the moral complexities and ethical dilemmas surrounding capital punishment. The conviction of sentencing of Carrie Lynn Dalton drew considerable attention to the controversial aspect of the case. The absence of Irene May's body and direct evidence presented significant challenges during the trial. The reliance on circumstantial evidence, while compelling, raised questions about the reliability and sufficiency of such proof in securing a conviction for a crime as heinous as this. The death penalty sentence further ignited public debate on the appropriateness and efficacy of capital punishment as a means of justice. The case of Irene May and the subsequent legal proceedings raised broader questions about the criminal justice system, the pursuit of truth, and the complexities of delivering justice in the face of such unimaginable violence. As Carrie Lynn Dalton awaited her fate on death row, the impact of her actions continued to resonate deeply with those affected by the tragedy. Irene May's family grappled with their grief and their enduring absence of closure, while the community reflected on the consequences of such brutality. The case of Carrie Lynn Dalton served as a haunting reminder of the dark depths to which humanity could descend and the indelible scars left by acts of violence on the fabric of society. Gillian's perspective as the victim's daughter. Gillian Hansard's perspective on the murder of her mother, Irene May, is deeply personal and laced with painful memories. At the time of the tragic event, Gillian was merely 5 years old, too young to fully comprehend the gravity of the situation unfolding around her. Nevertheless, the impact of her mother's untimely death would leave an indelible mark on her life. Gillian's recollection of her mother were a mix of personal memories and stories shared by others. She vividly recalls the struggles her mother faced with drug addiction, a battle that would often leave her absent and unable to fulfill the responsibilities of motherhood. At just a tender age, Jillian found herself and her younger brothers left to fend for themselves in a world rife with uncertainty and chaos. During these tumultuous times, Jillian and her brothers often found themselves hiding in their bedroom, seeking refuge from the unpredictability that surrounded them. Her journey from a challenging childhood to a stable adulthood stands as a testament to the power of love and strength of the human spirit to overcome adversity. Jillian's perspective as the victim's daughter is a poignant reminder of the lasting impact that violence and tragedy can have on the lives of those left behind. Her story serves as a call to society to prioritize compassion, support, and empathy for those who have endured such profound loss, helping them find healing and hope amidst the darkness. Carrie Lynn Dalton's perspective, a prison pen pal letter. In a poignant prison pen pal letter, Carrie Lynn Dalton attempts to shed light on her perspective, acknowledging the gravity of her situation while presenting herself in a new light. As a resident of death row, Dalton grapples with the reality of her conviction for a murder that lacks a body, weapons, or a crime scene. She claims to have experienced a profound change, one that has brought forth a newfound respect for all things and all people. Her life on death row has offered her a unique perspective on humanity, instilling in her a deep understanding of the value of honesty and truthfulness. The act of reaching out through letter writing represents a crucial aspect of Dalton's desire to connect with others. While locked away from the outside world, she seeks to forge connections through the written word, finding solace and companionship in the art of correspondence.
All the way to the bottom to say, wait a minute, man, this ain't right.
And now, how do you spend your days now?
I exercise, I read, I study. I try not to think, because if I think too hard, I hate myself.
You have a tiny self, that's it for you.
Then I see the cage and I want to blow up. How would you feel if you woke up and seen your thing? But I brought myself there, like you said.
Do you have contact with your family?
Yeah, I do.
Has your mom ever come to visit you?
She came every week until I came to death row. She can't. And I don't want to talk about them because I don't want them involved in it.
Yeah, I understand that thought, but what are your thoughts about being executed?
That's not the bad part.
The act of sharing her thoughts and feelings with others becomes a lifeline for Dalton, a way to navigate the isolation and darkness that pervades her life on death row. Acknowledging the serious nature of her situation, Dalton does not shy away from the weight of her crimes. However, she endeavors to find moments of joy and laughter amidst the desolation. Her quest to smile and laugh reflects a resilient spirit, an unwillingness to succumb entirely to the darkness of her circumstances. The ability to find moments of levity amidst the anguish demonstrates her resilience and determination to retain some semblance of humanity in the face of the abyss. In her letter, Dalton does not seek to downplay the gravity of her actions or the impact they have had on others. Instead, she aims to present a more nuanced and multifaceted portrayal of herself. The woman who once sought thrill and excitement now grapples with consequences of her choices, finding herself in a prison cell where remorse and introspection are her constant companions. For Carrie Lynn Dalton, the act of writing a prison pen pal letter represents more than mere correspondence. It becomes a testament to her humanity in the midst of a life marked by tragedy and incarceration. Her words carry the weight of remorse, the longing for connection, and the hope for redemption. Through the simple act of penning her thoughts, Dalton reveals a complex and multifaceted individual, grappling with her past, present, and uncertain future. As the recipient of her letter reads her words, they are confronted with the sobering reality of life lived behind bars, a life irrevocably altered by choices made and the consequences that followed. Dalton's perspective, captured within the confines of the letter, serves as a stark reminder of the human capacity for both darkness and resilience, as well as the potential for transformation and redemption, even in the bleakest of circumstances. Conclusion. In conclusion, the case of Carrie Lynn Dalton and the murder of Irene Louise May remains shrouded in darkness and uncertainty. Many distressing details have emerged over the course of the investigation and trial, painting a chilling picture of the heinous crime committed on that fateful day in June 1988. Though the body of Irene May has never been found, the confessions of two individuals involved in the murder suggest a horrifying fate, with May's remains allegedly dismembered and scattered to prevent discovery. The tragic reality is that, without any trace of her for over 3 decades, it is highly likely that Irene Louise May lost her life on that ominous night. Amidst the turmoil of her own troubled past, Irene May had been striving to turn her life around, seeking redemption and rehabilitation while attending parenting classes to provide a better future for her 2 children. Despite the hardship she faced, she made sincere efforts to improve her circumstances and break free from the clutches of drug addiction. Carrie Lynn Dalton's conviction was reached amidst a sea of conflicting evidence and unanswered questions. Her criminal history in association with methamphetamine cast a shadow over her character, raising doubts about her innocence. Nevertheless, the lack of direct evidence, the absence of a body, and the reliance on the circumstantial proof have left lingering uncertainties about the veracity of the conviction. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.